Howdy howdy, my name is Lily from Makecraft Game, and you're listening to Reading Rulebooks. Today we are going to be reading the rulebook for Dominion, so let's get right into it. Just real quick, I want to point out that this is the rulebook for the second edition of Dominion. You are a monarch, like your parents before you, a ruler of a small, pleasant kingdom of rivers and evergreens. Unlike your parents, however, you have hopes, dreams. You want a bigger and even more pleasant kingdom with more rivers and a wider variety of trees. You want a dominion. In all directions lie fiefs, freeholds, and feodoms, all small bits of land controlled by petty lords and verging on anarchy. You will bring civilization to these unfortunates, uniting them under your banner. But wait, it must be something in the air. Several other monarchs have had the exact same idea. You must race to get as much of the unclaimed land as possible while you can, fending them off along the way. To do this, you will hire minions, construct buildings, spruce up your castle, and fill the coffers of your treasury. Your parents wouldn't be proud, but your grandparents on your mother's side would be delighted. This is a game of building a deck of cards. The deck represents your dominion. It contains your resources, victory points, and the things you can do. It starts out as a small, sad collection of estates and coppers, but you hope that by the end of the game it will be brimming with gold, provinces, and the inhabitants and structures of your castle and kingdom. You win by having the most victory points in your deck when the game ends. Contents: 500 cards, 130 basic treasure cards, including 60 copper, 40 silver, and 30 gold, 48 basic victory cards, including 24 estates, 12 duchies, and 12 provinces, 30 curse cards, 262 kingdom cards, 10 of each artisan, bandit, bureaucrat, cellar, chapel, council room, festival, harbinger, laboratory, library, market, merchant, militia, mine, moat, moneylender, poacher, remodel, century, smithy, throne room, vassal, village, witch, and workshop, 12 gardens, 26 randomizer cards, 1 of each kingdom card with a different card back, 4 blank cards, unused, 1 trash mat, 1 plastic organizer tray, 1 organizing inlay, and 1 rule booklet. Before the first game, carefully place the cards in the organizer tray. Do not shuffle them. Please note that some cards have different backs than others. Playing cards, treasure cards, victory cards, curse cards, and kingdom cards all have a back with a tan border. The randomizer cards have a blue border. Do not mix the playing cards with the randomizer cards. Place the organizer inlay in the middle of the plastic organizer tray, placed such that the largest storage space is on the left, with artisans at the top of the plastic tray. Now unwrap the card decks and place the cards in the slots of the plastic organizer tray next to the matching names on the organizing inlay. When playing a game, you will remove only the cards used in that game, and then return them to their appropriate slots after each game. By doing so, you will always be able to easily and quickly set up a new game. Preparation. Each player takes 3 estates and 7 coppers and shuffles them face down as a starting deck. Place 17 face-up piles of cards on the table. The 7 base card piles, which are always used and always the same, and 10 kingdom card piles, which vary from game to game. The full set of cards available this game is called the supply. The base cards are copper, silver, gold, estate, duchy, province, and curse. Copper, silver, and gold use every copy you have of these, except coppers players already have. Estate, duchy, province use 8 copies of each for a 2-player game, 12 copies for a 3 to 4-player game. Curse use 10 with 2-player, 2 with 3-player, and all 30 with 4-player. There are 26 kingdom cards. If you have expansions, you can use those kingdom cards as well. Choose 10 kingdom cards to use, however you like. The others will not be used this game. You can pick the kingdom cards randomly by shuffling the randomizer cards, the cards with the blue frame backs, and turning over 10 of them. There are a few pre-made sets of 10 cards in the recommended set section that you can try. For your very first game of Dominion, use these cards: cellar, market, merchant, militia, mine, moat, remodel, smithy, village, and workshop. Whichever 10 cards you pick, get out those piles, 10 copies of each card. Do not put the randomizer card in the pile. When a Victory Kingdom card is used, i.e. Gardens, it gets 8 copies for 2 players, 12 copies for 3 to 4 players, as well as other victory cards. Put the trash mat near the piles. Randomly choose a starting player. If you have just played a game of Dominion and it was not a tie, have the player who won the previous game go last. The player to their left goes first. Each player draws an initial hand of 5 cards. Overview. Dominion is a game of building a deck of cards. Each player has their own deck, their own discard pile, their own hand of cards, and play area. Players start with a weak initial deck and gradually acquire better cards over the course of the game. Players take turns. Each turn has 3 phases: action, then buy, then cleanup, which you can remember as ABC. In the action phase, you play 1 action card from your hand. In the buy phase, you can play any number of treasure cards and then buy 1 card to add to your deck. And in cleanup, you sweep up all your cards from play and from your hand and discard them. Then draw a new hand of 5 cards, shuffling as needed. The game ends after 3 piles are empty or the province pile is empty. Then, players count up victory points on all of their cards, and the player with the most victory points wins. Action phase. In your action phase, you can play 1 action card from your hand. Those cards that say action on the bottom and, by default, have a white banner. Some are other colors due to additional types. Playing an action card has 3 steps: announcing it, moving it to the in-play area, the table space in front of you, and following the instructions on it in order top to bottom. If a card has a dividing line, i.e. moat, you stop there. Instructions below the line happen at some other time indicated. If you cannot do everything a card tells you to do, you must do as much as you can. You can still play a card even if you know you will not be able to do everything it tells you to. Some cards give +1 action. This increases how many action cards you can play in a turn. The increase happens right then, but you do not have to play the next action card until completely finishing the first one. Some cards give +2 actions. That means you can play 2 more action cards that turn. So, for example, if you play Militia, which does not give plus actions, you resolve Militia and are done with your action phase. But you could instead play a market, then another market, then a Militia. Each market gives you +1 action, which lets you keep playing actions. Using up your actions is optional. You can have an action card left in hand that you can play and decide not to play it. Buy phase. First, you can play any number of treasure cards from your hand in any order. Treasure cards say treasure on the bottom and have a yellow banner. You play 1 by moving it to the in-play area. You probably will not announce your treasures, though you can if you want. The treasures have no text, just a big coin with a number on it. You get that many coins to spend this turn. 1 coin for a copper, 2 for a silver, and 3 for gold, indicated by a coin with the corresponding numbers. The amount is also in the corners at the top of treasures. You do not have to play every treasure in your hand, but only get coins this turn for the treasures you play. Then you can buy 1 card, costing as many cards as you have or less. Coins are indicated in the lower left corner of the card. You buy a card by choosing it from the supply and then gaining it. Gaining a card means moving it from the supply to your discard pile. Your total amount of coins available to spend goes down by the cost of the card. For example, if you played 4 coppers and a silver, that makes 6 coins total. If you bought a market, that cost 5 coins. So you would move a market from the supply to your discard pile and have 1 coin left. Buying cards does not use up treasure cards. You still have the cards. The treasures produce income usable every time you draw them. Buying cards just uses up the coins you have available this turn. Some cards give +1 buy. This increases how many cards you can buy in a turn in your buy phase. For example, with 6 coins and an extra buy, you could buy 2 silvers, which cost 3 coins each. Using up your buys is optional. You can have 2 buys, but just buy 1 card, or skip buying entirely. As copper costs 0 coins, you could use a buy with no coins to buy a copper. You cannot go back and play more treasures after buying a card. First, play treasures, then buy. Cleanup phase. Take all of the cards you have in play, both actions and treasures, and any remaining cards in your hand, put them all into your discard pile. The order does not matter. You can hide the cards from your hand under the played cards if you want to. Draw a new hand of 5 cards. If your deck has fewer than 5 cards, first shuffle your discard pile and put it under your deck, then draw. Play passes to the player to your left. Any unused plus actions, unused plus buys, or unspent coins that you had left are gone. You start each turn fresh. Game end. The game ends at the end of a turn. If either the province pile is empty, or any 3 or more supply piles are empty. Any piles at all, including kingdom cards, curses, copper, etc. Take all of your cards from your hand, deck, discard pile, play area, and even set aside cards, and sort them for putting them back into their piles. Count up your victory points. The player with the most victory points wins. If players tie for victory points, a player who tied but had fewer turns wins. If players tie and had the same number of turns, they rejoice in their shared victory. Card types. Every card has types listed on the bottom. A color, which helps indicate certain types, and a cost in the lower left corner. Action cards all have a text box with instructions. Sometimes other cards do. Cards can have multiple types. A card has all of its types for all purposes. For example, Throne Room lets you play an action card twice. That card could be Witch, which is an action attack, or Moat, which is an action reaction, or Smithy, an action. These are the card types present in the main set. Expansions add some. Action. These can be played in your action phase to do what they say to do in the text box. Treasure. These can be played in your buy phase to produce coins used to buy cards. The amount of coins is indicated in the top corner and on the big coin symbol. Treasures in expansions may have rules on them like action cards. Victory. These are generally not useful during the game, but are worth victory points at the end, indicated by a number next to a big victory point symbol. Curse. These are bad cards worth -1 victory points. Normally, they have no use and you will not choose to buy them, though you can. However, you may receive them from other players via Witch. Attack. These are cards that hurt other players directly somehow. Reaction. These are cards that can be used in some way at an unusual time. Any such use is spelled out on the reaction card. For example, Moat says it can be revealed when another player plays an attack card. Reactions are used one at a time, which matters for expansion reactions. Terminology. Some special terms are used in card text. 4 terms involve a number after a plus symbol. +2 is the same as +1 twice, and so on. +1 action. You may play an additional action card this turn. When this happens, it just adds to the number of action cards you can play. You finish resolving the current card before actually playing more action cards. Actions are only usable in the action phase. When you have multiple actions, it can be helpful to say the number out loud to remember it. Some players like to form a tree on the table, putting 2 played actions on a village or festival to show its actions being used up. +1 buy. You may buy an additional card in your buy phase this turn. You do not have to use extra buys. You split your coins among your buys. +1 card. Draw a card. You draw the card immediately. If you have to draw more cards than are left in your deck, shuffle your discard pile, put it under your deck, and then draw. If there still are not enough cards to draw, you just draw as many as you can. +1 coin. You have an extra coin to spend in your buy phase this turn. +1 coin does not give you a copper card. It just adds to how much coins you can spend this turn. Other terms involve moving cards, seeing cards, and where cards are. Discard a card. Move a card from your hand to your discard pile. Sometimes a card will tell you to discard a card from another location, but by default, discarded cards come from hands. You place the discarded card on top of your discard pile, face up. If you discarded multiple cards at once, you do not need to reveal them all, just the one you put on top. Gain a card. Take a card from the supply and put it onto your discard pile. Sometimes a card will let you gain a card from a place other than the supply, but by default, gained cards come from the supply. Sometimes a card will let you gain a card to a location other than your discard pile, but by default, all gained cards are put into your discard pile. You do not play a card when you gain it. It just goes to your discard pile. In play, being in a player's play area. Cards become in play when played, and usually stay there until discarded from play in cleanup. Only played cards are in play. Set aside cards, cards in the trash, in the supply in hands, are not in play. Look at a card. You get to see the card, other players do not. After looking at it, return it to wherever it was, unless otherwise instructed. Play a card. Put a card into play and follow the instructions on it. When a card tells you to play a card, that does not use up an action play for the turn. As with playing a card normally, you follow the instructions in order, stopping at the dividing line when there is one. As always, played cards go into play, not directly into the discard pile. Reveal a card. All players get to see the card. After revealing it, return it to wherever it was, unless otherwise instructed. Set aside a card. Put the card on the table outside of the play area. Set aside cards are not in play. Set aside cards are face up unless otherwise specified. A card that sets a card aside will say when to move it somewhere else. Trash a card. Put a card into the trash pile. This is a way of getting rid of a card. A trash card is no longer one of your cards. The trash pile is on the trash mat face up. Players may look through the trash pile at any time. The order of the trash pile does not matter. Players can reorder it. Cards in the trash are essentially out of the game, though some expansion cards can get to them. Finally, there are 3 symbols used in text boxes. Victory points. The player with the most victory points wins. The coin symbol. This indicates costs of cards and amounts of money produced. Dividing line. Some cards have the text box divided with a line, i.e. moat. This separates abilities that happened at different times. When playing the card, you follow the instructions above the line only. The text below the line will say when it applies. Shuffling. If you have to do anything with your deck, for example, draw, look at, reveal, set aside, discard, or trash cards, and you need more cards than are left in your deck, first shuffle your discard pile and put it under your deck, then do the thing. If there are still not enough cards, do the thing with however many cards you can. If when shuffling there are no cards in your deck, the shuffled discard pile simply becomes your new deck. When your deck is empty, you do not shuffle until you need to do something with cards from your deck. If you have to put a card on top of your deck when it is empty, that card becomes the only card in your deck. Additional rules. You can count the number of cards in your deck at any time without looking at the card fronts, but cannot look through or count your discard pile or another player's deck or discard pile. The number of cards in each player's hand is public, as is the top card of each discard pile. All cards in play are public. Set aside cards are normally public, but sometimes face down. Players can look through the trash pile at any time. When interacting with a discard pile, i.e. with Harbinger, it is not necessary to keep it in the same order. The only thing that ever matters about that order is that the top card is public. It is also never necessary to keep the trash pile in a particular order. When 2 things happen, different players, at the same time, go in turn order starting with the player whose turn it is. For example, when a player plays a witch, the other players gain curses in turn order, which may matter if the curses run out. When 2 things happen to one player at the same time, that player picks the order to do them, even if some are mandatory and some are not. This can come up with expansions. When a card gives you a choice, choose one, you can pick any option without considering whether or not you will be able to do it. This comes up with expansions. 5 to 6 player rules. To play with 5 or 6 players, you need additional base cards. These are available in the base card product and in the big box, or you could have 2 copies of Dominion. Most victory piles still have 12 cards, as with 3 to 4 player games. However, use 15 provinces for 5 players and use 18 provinces for 6 players. Use 40 curses for 5 players, 50 curses for 6 players. Add all of the extra coppers, silvers, and golds to those piles. The game end condition for 5 to 6 players is any 4 piles are empty or the province pile is empty. Sample turns. Before the game, shuffle your starting 10 cards, 7 coppers and 3 estates, and place them face down as your deck. Draw the top 5 cards as your starting hand. In this example, you have 1 estate and 4 coppers. The rest remain as your deck. First turn. As you have no action cards to start the game, you skip the action phase and go directly to the buy phase. You play 4 copper cards from your hand to buy a remodel card, cost 4 coins from the supply, placing it on your discard pile. After completing your buy, you go to the cleanup phase. Here you place the cards you played on the discard pile and the cards left in your hand there as well. Finally, you draw 5 cards from your deck for your next turn. This time, you get 2 estates and 3 coppers. Your first turn is over, and the opponent on your left begins their turn. Second turn. After your opponents complete their turns, it is your second turn. Again, you have no action cards, so you go directly to the buy phase. This time, you play your 3 copper cards to buy a silver card, placing it on your discard pile. In your cleanup phase, you place the 3 coppers you played on your discard pile and the 2 estate cards left in your hand there as well. Finally, you draw 5 cards from your deck for your next turn. Since your deck is empty, you shuffle your discard pile, place it face down, and draw 5 cards from it. This time, you get 1 estate, 1 silver, 2 coppers, and 1 remodel. Your second turn is over, and the opponent on your left begins their turn. Third turn. After your opponents complete their turns, you begin your third turn with the action phase and play remodel. You decide to trash the estate from your hand and gain a smithy from the supply, cost 4 coins, which equals the cost of the estate plus 2. Placing it on your discard pile. You have 4 coins in your hand for the buy phase. You play the 4, 2 copper cards, and 1 silver card, and decide to buy a militia card from the supply, placing it in your discard pile. In your cleanup phase, you discard your played cards and hand as usual, then draw 5 cards to end your turn. Random card notes. Artisan. The card you gain comes from the supply and is put into your hand. You cannot use coins to increase how expensive of a card you gain. It always costs from 0 to 5. After gaining the card, you put a card from your hand onto your deck. That can be the card you just gained or a different card. Bandit. First, you gain a gold from the supply, putting it into your discard pile. Then each other player, in turn order, reveals their top 2 card, trashes one they choose that is a treasure other than copper, i.e. silver or gold, and discards the other revealed cards. A player who did not reveal a treasure card other than copper simply discards both cards. Bureaucrat. A player with no cards in their deck will have the card they put on top become the only card in their deck. Seller. Choose any number of cards from your hand, discard them all at once, then draw as many cards as you actually discarded. If this causes you to shuffle, you will shuffle in the cards you discarded. You do not have to let players see any but the top card discarded. However, the number of cards you discard is public. Chapel. You cannot trash the chapel itself since it is not in your hand after you play it. Council room. The other players draw a card whether they want to or not. Festival. You get +2 actions, +1 buy, and +2 coins. Gardens. For example, if you have 37 cards at the end of the game, each copy of Gardens you have is worth 3 victory points. Use 8 copies of Garden in a 2-player game, 12 copies for 3 or more players. Harbinger. First draw a card and get +1 action. Then look through your discard pile, and you may put a card from it on top of your deck. Putting a card on top is optional. Laboratory. You draw 2 cards and get +1 action. Library. You look at cards one at a time, putting each one into your hand or setting it aside until you have 7 cards in hand. Then you discard the set aside cards. If you shuffle in the middle of doing this, you do not shuffle in the set aside cards. Only action cards can be set aside. You are not forced to set aside action cards, that is just an option. If you already have 7 cards in hand to start, you do not draw any cards. Market. You draw a card and get +1 action, +1 coin, and +1 buy. Merchant. When you play Merchant, you draw a card and get +1 action. If you end up playing a silver later in the turn, it comes with +1 coin. If you play more than one merchant, each gives you +1 coin when you play that first silver. But if you play more than one silver, you only get the +1 coin for the first silver. Militia. Players with 3 or fewer cards in hand do not discard any cards. Players with more cards discard until they have only 3. Mine. You can, for example, trash a copper to gain a silver, or trash a silver to gain a gold. The treasure you gain comes from the supply and is put into your hand. You can play it for coins the same turn. If you do not have a treasure to trash, you do not gain one. Moat. An attack card says attack on the bottom line. In this set, Bandit, Bureaucrat, Militia, and Witch are attacks. When another player plays an attack card, you may reveal a moat from your hand before the attack card does anything, to be unaffected by the attack. You do not reveal cards to Bandit, or put a victory card on your deck from Bureaucrat, or discard for Militia, or gain a curse for Witch. Moat stays in your hand and can be played on your next turn. Moat does not stop anything an attack does to another player, or for the player who played it. It just protects you personally. Moat can also be played on your turn for +2 cards. If multiple attacks are played on a turn or in a round of turns, you may reveal Moat for as many of them as you want. Moneylender. You only get the +3 coins if you actually trashed a copper. Poacher. You draw your 1 card before discarding. If there are no empty piles, you do not discard. If there is 1 empty pile, you discard 1 card. If there are 2 empty piles, you discard 2 cards, and so on. This includes all supply piles, including curses, coppers, poachers itself, etc. If you do not have enough cards to discard, just discard the rest of your hand. Remodel. You cannot trash the remodel itself since it is not in your hand after you play it. If you do not have a card to trash, you do not gain one. If you do gain a card, it comes from the supply and is put into your discard pile. The gained card does not need to cost exactly 2 more than the trashed card. It can cost that much or less, and can even be another copy of the trashed card. You cannot use coins to increase how expensive of a card you gain. Sentry. First you draw a card and get +1 action. Then you look at the top 2 cards of your deck. You can trash both, or discard both, or put both back in either order. Or you can trash 1 and discard 1, or trash 1 and put 1 back, or discard 1 and put 1 back. Smithy. You draw 3 cards. Throne Room. Playing an action card from your hand is optional. If you do play one, you resolve it completely, then play it a second time. You cannot play other cards in between unless told to by the card, such as with Vassal or Throne Room itself. Playing action cards with Throne Room is just like playing action cards normally, except it does not use up action plays for the turn. For example, if you start a turn by playing Throne Room on Village, you would draw a card, get +2 actions, draw another card, and get +2 actions again, leaving you with 4 actions. If you Throne Room a Throne Room, you may play an action card twice, then may play another action card twice. You do not play one action card 4 times. Vassal. If the card is an action card, you can play it, but do not have to. If you do play it, you move it into your play area and follow its instructions. This does not use up one of your action plays for the turn. Village. You draw a card and get +2 actions. Witch. The curses come from the supply and are put into discard piles. They are given out in turn order, which can matter when the curse pile is low. When the curses are gone, you can still play Witch for +2 cards. Workshop. The card you gain comes from the supply and is put in your discard pile. You cannot use coins to increase how expensive of a card you gain. It will always cost from 0 to 4. Recommended sets of 10. Players can play Dominion with any set of 10 kingdom cards, but these sets have been specifically picked out to be entertaining and show off card interactions and strategies. Dominion now has a large number of expansions with which you can add to your fun. We have included recommended sets for those expansions as well. Dominion alone. First game: Cellar, Market, Merchant, Militia, Mine, Moat, Remodel, Smithy, Village, and Workshop. Size distortion. Artisan, Bandit, Bureaucrat, Chapel, Festival, Gardens, Century, Throne Room, Witch, and Workshop. Deck top: Artisan, Bureaucrat, Council Room, Festival, Harbinger, Laboratory, Moneylender, Century, Vassal, and Village. Sleight of hand: Cellar, Council Room, Festival, Gardens, Library, Harbinger, Militia, Poacher, Smithy, and Throne Room. Improvements: Artisan, Cellar, Market, Merchant, Mine, Moat, Moneylender, Poacher, Remodel, and Witch. Silver and gold: Bandit, Bureaucrat, Chapel, Harbinger, Laboratory, Merchant, Mine, Moneylender, Throne Room, and Vassal. I'm not going to go over the recommended sets for the expansions, but you can check it out on page 15 of the rulebook if you're interested in those. And that is the rulebook for Dominion. Now, I have a very special place in my heart for Dominion because it's really one of the first board games that I got into besides Magic the Gathering. It wasn't that crazy of a transition to go from Magic to a deck building game where there is no board and it is all cards, but this game is something I played a lot growing up, and it really kind of propelled me into the world of board games, and it's one of my favorites for that because it's just such a classic deck builder. Now, one thing that I've kind of learned over the ages is this game has what I like to refer to as a static market, in which that the market cards will not change once they are chosen. And so buying a card's not going to reveal anything new. And I also tend to find that I love those games the most because you can really strategize and make plans. Because the cards that you want, unless they're sold out, will be there on your next turn. So do I like this game? Yes. Do I recommend this game? Absolutely. Is this game for everyone? Probably not. This is very much an engine building game. There is very low player interaction. It is more of a solitary engagement that we're all doing as a group. That being said, you still can totally mess with your opponents depending on the deck market that you build. I remember growing up, I was the only person to ever buy the witch cards, and soon my family realized how much they hated getting cursed and started figuring out how they could curse me instead. So there's definitely still ways to interact with people if you really want to. But overall, yeah, Dominion's a great classic game. If you like a classic deck builder, Dominion is definitely a good game to play. And that's it for the Dominion episode. If there's any rulebook that you would like to hear, please leave a comment in any of the Reading Rulebooks videos on the Makecraft Game YouTube channel. Also check out makecraftgame.com for more content. And remember to like, comment, and subscribe wherever you find me. I hope you had a wonderful day, and this has been Reading Rulebooks.